Welcome to everyone joining us on the Wednesday study session that shall not be named. We're here on Zoom and we're here on YouTube. But everybody got, we got a small crew today, but welcome to Ron, Arlene, Michael, Arnold, and Genevieve, and everybody watching online on YouTube. We missed last week, obviously, because of the flood and the rain and the hurricane, so hopefully everybody's okay. And we're going to continue today, concluding our talk 1 week later than planned on the Kabbalah, which is a really interesting subject, as we all know. So we've had a lot of fun with it. Next week, I think we're going to talk about high holidays because they're here. And I'm sure you guys are just as nervous and worried about them as I am.
Well, not my sermon.
Yeah, I've got 4 out of 5 done. The 5th one is all the materials there, so I'll be finished with the sermons on time. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be good. So what I'm asking everybody is I'm going to have applause and I'm going to have laugh signs that are going to be lifted up so people online won't be able to see it, but you will. So just make sure to laugh appropriately.
When you have 2 services in the same day, you'll use the same sermon.
I use absolutely the same sermon.
Sure.
There's no way I'm writing an extra 2 sermons. That's just too much. So I'm doing my best. But yeah, hopefully they'll be good. And hopefully everything, we have also, we have Rachel this year, so we got awesome music coming, and she's going to, doing such an amazing job in so many ways. So that's great. So it should be a lot of fun.
I love listening to her when she chants from.
I know. Yeah, she has really been a really great addition in so many ways. So we're very fortunate to have her.
And I noticed a difference in you also. You're more relaxed now because you have people that are there to help you.
That's right. Also, the drugs I'm taking, anxiety, that helps a lot. But I mean, Rachel helps as well. She's definitely, helped. So what we're going to do today is we'll just do a little bit of review of what we've done since it's been about 2 weeks, and we're going to finish off the rest of the Sfirot, the 10 emanations of God. We're going to go over one other teaching of Kabbalah and and then kind of finish up here. So we've talked a lot about a variety of things. Remember, Kabbalah is not one book, and even though the Zohar is kind of the central book, it's not one idea. It's a wide variety of ideas, trying to find connections to God and our world. We talked about how we're all waves in the ocean, that we're always connected to the whole, even when we're individuals. We talked about how God is everything, but we refer to God as nothing, because nothing is not an insult in Kabbalah, it's a compliment. It means there's no limitations. So we can't refer to God as anything because that would be limiting God. If I said God was the biggest thing in the universe, that's still limiting. So we refer to God as nothing, and our quest to meet God leads us to try and be nothing. Being nothing is not negative when it comes to Kabbalah. It means we are not trying to be part of it. We're trying to connect. Ron.
Yeah. Do you believe that God is the God of the entire universe, or possibly just the earth?
That is an excellent question. So from the Jewish perspective, generally we see God as, even though some believe God has limits, that God is the creator of the universe generally. But there are other people who look at God as more earth-centric, because obviously, except for the very beginning of Genesis, what we have is God's relationship with this planet. So some do, I think, probably it's not as much of a Jewish belief, but there are some out there that maybe God is just particular to our world. But generally speaking, we look at God in the overall spectrum. Now, it makes it very interesting because when we look at the Bible, we see God's relationship with us taking hold in every way, especially in the language. So many of us believe, obviously, God gave it to us in a way we understand. For instance, days. When God creates the world in 1 day or 7 days, that for us is using the 24-hour cycle of our planet going around the sun, where that is, of course, limited to our planet. The universe is not revolving around the sun in 24 hours. So the universe could care less about our planet revolving around the sun in 24 hours. So things like that mean we're speaking or listening to God in a way that God speaks particularly to us. So at the very beginning, we see more of a universalistic view, but we're still seeing this planet Earth central view by using the word day. So again, yes. So it's very difficult to take God away from God's role in Earth. And it's also very difficult to understand a being that could create the universe or universes or the cosmos, caring what happens to the third planet around this medium-sized sun, this medium-sized star. So it is, yeah. So what is so amazing is we believe a God created the universe and cares about this one planet amongst so many that are almost uncountable. That's a great question. So generally speaking, we believe of God as a universalistic God. We look at God as everything. So some believe God had to retract God's self. They call it Tsimshian. Retract God's self to put the universe inside God. It's kind of like making a hole in our bodies of nothingness and putting the universe there almost. So that's one of the viewpoints, that if God is everything, God had to retract God's self. Another viewpoint is that if God is everything and we exist, that means we are part of God. It also means we're connected to everybody and everything in ways that we cannot even begin to imagine. And so we talked a lot about these different viewpoints and how God's name even means power. Because if you have God's name, a name is power. I can say Ron, and Ron looks at me. That is power over Ron. Just knowing somebody's name. That's why in some cultures names are so important. And how we believe this one word should only be spoken once a year by the high priest in the temple before it was destroyed. So we talked about how God reveals God to us, but God cannot reveal God to us. We can't see God in God's full glory because the entire idea would be too overwhelming. We see in the Bible that only Moses could see the back edge of God just for a second, but nobody else is capable. So we believe God reveals God's self to us in a limited fashion, and that's what the Sefirot are, the 10 emanations. So what it means is, in basic sense, and I'll put up the one of the maps, although it doesn't have one of the things I like in there. And here, these are the emanations from God, meaning in order for us to connect to God, we have to connect to little pieces of God that God gives to us. So here is a bridge to God in which we try and go higher and get closer to God through these emanations, these revelations that God gives us. And we talked about the different ones, and we're going to review them because we didn't get to the last couple. But again, the higher up on the level you are, the closer you are to God. So we talked about them, I think last week, or was it 2 weeks ago? I don't remember which week we talked about them, but they're called the Sefirot. And we talked about how we are connected to God through them. And let's go over some of the different ones. They're basically, the Sefirot are these vessels, are to reveal God to us in ways that we can understand God, or pieces of God, because God is unlimited, Ein Sof. And so the first two that we have the possibility of seeing, well, actually they're beyond our coast, but the highest two, not the highest one is basically almost God's self. And the next two are the ones we start with. And of course, those are the ones that we strive to reach but will never reach. So what are those two? The ones we're talking about are Chokhmah and Bina. So Chokhmah and Bina. Chokhmah is the ability to understand or to what we can see, what we reveal to us. So it is the amount we can understand, whereas Bina, which is right next to us, is our ability to derive or to limit what we're seeing so that we can understand it. So one is like the information of God, and the other is how we can limit what we're reading. It's kind of like studying for a test. You know, when we study for a test, we read lots of stuff, but we have to know which pieces we need to know for the test, and we often have to figure that out for ourselves. So when we start at the highest levels here, we're talking about all this information, but we're also talking on one side, but on the other side, we're talking about how do we organize this information into what we're needed. And then the next thing would be dot, how do we use that information? How do we understand God so it's one is the God, the ability to limit what we're intaking for useful purposes and then using that information. And that's the first two and really a third one that they add sometimes. So I'll put the thing back on so you can see what I'm talking about. So I have to go back and forth because I have notes I'm using. So right here we have Chokhmah. Annotate. Chokhmah, wisdom, and Bina. And then often we add an extra one here, which is dot, which is kind of like, so that go here like that.
And what does that mean?
It's like knowledge. It's, in this case, though, it's the knowledge to work with what you have. So we have Chokhmah is the wisdom or all the information. Bina is concentrating that information into understanding, and da'at is using God to make ourselves better individuals or to act. It's really how we act with God. So those are the first two. The next three we talked about were no less, I mean, they're all important. It's just where they are. They are chesed, which is loving kindness, and gevura, which is strength. So chesed is the love and kindness which is essential to our being good human beings. However, too much loving kindness is a detriment to ourselves and to the world. If we're loving and kind to every single individual, people can hurt us. People will take from us. I'll give all my money away to somebody because he's nice to me. Or, you know, you have to have limits, and gevura as the strength to limit our loving kindness so that we can then use it in a way that is appropriate. And that is Tiferet, God's glory. So if we look at this again, oops, let me get to that. So right here, we have loving kindness, Din, and Tiferet. This is all the loving kindness we have. Din is kind of like the ability to enact justice or to control loving kindness so it is just and fair. And Tiferet is kind of the ability to use it. So it's very similar to what we had up there. You've got a lot of stuff. You have to need to be able to organize the stuff and then use the stuff. So this is God is full loving kindness, but we can't just live on loving kindness. We have to have the ability to understand what is just about it, what it really should be. Often this is called gevura instead of din, but on this one's din. And then Tiferet is the ability to use the balance of loving kindness and strength and justice for purposes. So those are now the one we hadn't got to yet. What we're going to talk about now are these. Oops, cancel. Screen share. It is not, what is weird? Cancel. It's It's not letting me screen share for some reason. Let's try it again. There you go. So now we're going to go to the next three, which of course are at the bottom here. Eternity, majesty, and foundation. And we're going to talk a little bit about those. I don't think we got to those last time, and so that's why we'll talk about them this time. So what are the three? The first one on the is Netzach, which is, in this case, in many regards, eternity. And that is the idea of the way we are able to dominate, or the way we're able to impact a conversation. This is the strength we have to overwhelm others, whereas Hod is submission. It's the exact opposite. It's the way we allow other people to control us. So obviously the next one is balance. It's a balance between showing strength and having an impact on others, and letting people have an impact on us, and our ability to balance and use it properly. So one is our ability to impact others. The other is the ability to have others impact us. And the third one is to know the balance of the two. What is the balance on how we affect other people and let them affect us? It's the relationships we have with people and with God. And then if you look at the bottom section is basically the divine presence. That is kind of like God's presence with us, the Shekhinah, the very limited fashion that we all can see God. Whereas Keter up there is the highest level that God can reveal to us, but it's still too much for us to understand. So here, we don't ever get up here. Probably don't even get up here. So for us, there's limits to how far we get, and it's usually right here. If we get up to these two, we're doing pretty good. Everybody really can get to here. And so it's kind of like of a bridge as we get older. And basically what the Sefirot is simply is balance. That's what it is. It's balancing everything together. Things that are overwhelmingly good need to have structure as well. And there's a lot of, in Judaism, it is important to donate money, but they also place sages limits on how much money you should donate. Don't donate more than you can afford to donate so that it affects your family. How many cultures say limit what you donate? Very few. Ron.
Yeah, what you mentioned that we don't get up to the top three.
You do, Ron. Ron, you are the exception.
Thank you. But isn't that the way individual person interprets that?
Exactly. It is. And a lot of it is interpretation as we get older. Again, there's a lot of different ways to look at the Sefirot and the bridges. Some look at it as a body. I'll show you that right here. For some look at it as oops, that's not the picture I wanted. Where is it? Right here. Another way to look at it is like this. Some look at it as the body. The dot, the one I talked about, connecting these is where you can, and then you have, the dot is the mind, the gevura, kindness, and then you have here. So it's really looked at it how we balance our bodies together. Some look at it from a male-female perspective. And as I mentioned earlier, it goes against the stereotype. The female section is considered this, the strength section, while the more emotional section is considered the male. Because you think about in the household, on average, who is really the disciplinarian for the children? Is it the father or the mother traditionally? It's usually the mother, if you think about it. Who runs the household? Who is the strength of the relationship? It's usually the mother, not always, but if we talk about generalities. So some look at it from a body perspective. Some look at it from a male-female perspective, that God has both male and female traits, as do we. So there's a lot of different ways to look at the Sefirot. I like looking at it as a bridge to God, basically. We all can find God, but some of us can only go so far on the bridge. Some of us can only go so far at this point, but as we get older, we may be able to get farther. Some of us are naturally inclined to get farther on the bridge, and some of us have to struggle to even get on the bridge at all. But it is there for us to understand. It's all about trying to figure out God in get as much God as we can get, basically. And that's what it's all about. And so everything, again, is about God and God's glory and trying to feel God's presence so that we are better human being. And we're going to talk about basically 3 dimensions that are to mysticism. So mysticism or Kabbalah, as I said, there's a lot of different strains. It's all about picking and studying what you find connective and what's meaningful to you. It's also, as we mentioned, traditionally you don't start studying Kabbalah until you're what age? 40. And again, that is much more of an important number for 1,000 years ago or 500 years ago than for today. Because as we mentioned last week or the week before, 100 years ago, 120 years ago in America, the average life expectancy for a person was like 41. And that was after the start of the industrial age, where you had some medications. Before that, obviously, it was in the 30s. So when a lot of this was written, if you got to 40, you had lived basically a rich, full life. You'd already raised your kids, because you start in your teens probably with your kids. So you've already raised them. You've been working since you were 15 at least, probably earlier, because you start out, in some sort of training system. So you're working 13, 14, 15 because you don't live that long. For us, obviously, we have moved the start of our professional and adult lives to much later in the Western world. Many of us don't have kids until we're 50. So the idea that you have to start studying at 40 is not really as relevant. It's more about you start studying when you're ready. You don't want to study Kabbalah before you've lived your life, because you can get stuck in it in a way that will prevent you from living. And so what's important for us to understand, even though their aesthetics are really like, there are people who study Kabbalah and they live their life that way. In Judaism, we don't have what you would call hermits. Hermits are very rare, and they're not something we want you to be. There's rare moments where a certain person succeeds as a hermit because they're so wise. But generally speaking, the mystics are not people who go into the desert and commune with God by themselves. They're supposed to be in society and have kids and work and be part of the world. You can't really be a mystic in Judaism if you're an outcast and you're living alone in a shack in the desert. It's really almost impossible, because you have to have the community. You have to have people to study it with, people to relate with. You have to be able to act righteously with people to reach any level. So it's kind of the opposite when we say mystics in Judaism. It's kind of the opposite of what you would think, from, the stereotype of the guy who goes and lives in the desert for 50 years. So that's really not part of Judaism, although there have been exceptions. A famous exception is, of course, the Essenes, which are the group of people who went into the desert, and older guys, and lived, never expecting to have kids and to die out. And the only reason we know anything about them is because they left their library behind when they fled the Romans, and that became the Dead Sea Scrolls. So we know about this strange group of people just because of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Otherwise, they would be not even probably a footnote in history. And obviously, they're now a major part of history because they left their library behind. So when it comes to what was I saying? To mysticism, we're going to talk about two different things. First, there's three kind of dimensions, some believe. One is the investigative, and that is searching the hidden realities. It's like searching for secrets. You look at text and you try and find the hidden meaning. You talk to sages or read about their, you talk to masters of Kabbalah and see, you look for direct visitation from, angels. It's kind of the investigating ways to find these hidden meanings. So most of it is scriptural, but there's other ways as well. So one is you do the investigative, you kind of investigate what's out there. But you also do the, obviously if you're investigating, you have to experiment with it. And that is experimenting with encounters. And that is some sort of mystical retreat-like aspect, but staying within the world. So it's how do you find these mystical moments while you're living in the world. And then, as I mentioned, you have to have the practical, because the idea of communing with angels or connecting with God only is applicable to Judaism if you use it to be a good person. So it is not just about looking for and finding and experiencing. It's about using it for good intentions. So any questions so far? Because I want to make sure to differentiate Jewish mysticism from what we would think other religions or cultures may have. I've answered all the questions on Kabbalah. Fantastic. See you later. We got no more to talk about. I've done it all. We'll do one more aspect of Kabbalah because I know it's a lot we've talked about. But so what are the different levels of the soul? So we believe that human beings have souls, but Kabbalah tries to go into the idea of what is the soul. Because we have souls, which goes all the way back to the very beginning of Genesis. God creates a body for the first human, or at least the one in the Garden of Eden, and pours the soul in. So we already have the soul, which is some sort of connective body, entity connected to God in the next world within the bounds of these human forms. And so what are the parts of the soul? And there's like three basic parts, but there's additives as well. Like the first part is nefesh. And that is, and basically there's three parts: nefesh, ruach, and neshama. They are three words that all mean the same thing on one level, excuse me. They all mean soul or spirit, in one case wind, nefesh, ruach, neshama. But in Kabbalah, they mean different aspects. So nefesh is the lower part of the soul. It's the animal part of the soul. It's basically the instinctive part, what we're given at birth. It's the same thing we have in connection to animals. It's the cravings. It's, I want to eat, I'm going to eat, like a baby. I'm upset, I'm going to cry. I'm tired, I am going to sleep. This is the nefesh, that instinctive part of our bodies. And obviously we all have it. Ruach is the middle part of the soul, and it contains our moral virtues, the ability to distinguish between good and evil. So this, in some ways, separates us from animals, the ability to have moral virtues and the ability to distinguish between good and evil. The next one is the neshama, and that's the higher form. That is sometimes called the super soul. It's what connects us to the afterlife. It's the ability to understand there is a God and that we have a connective part to our world. This, not everybody has it, but not everybody uses it. Everybody uses the first one. Most people use this ruach, but the neshama is the one that you try and get on a higher plane of existence, understanding our connection to God and our place in the world. So these are the three basic souls Kabbalah believes we all have. Nefesh, ruach, and neshama. But there are other souls that some have, and one would be chaya, which is what they say is to have an awareness of the divine life force itself. It's like a higher level of neshama. This is not one that is automatic. This is a soul you can almost add. It's like adding a part to your soul, going beyond just aware that I'm part of the universe, but trying to actually have a connection to the life force. And then Yechida, which is really one that nobody can have, but they speculate is like, I can actually commune with God. It's like, wow, I am Moses almost, which most people except for Moses and Ron don't have. So except for Moses and Ron. And then some say there's even more. Some say there's Ruach HaKodesh, which is the spirit of prophecy, where we connect with the kind of like the prophets of the Bible, that we can feel, predict the future almost. And then we get the religious ones. They say there's the neshama yasira, which is the supplemental soul, which is the additional soul. Excuse me. This one is a very popular notion. Excuse me. This is the soul we get every Friday when Shabbat comes. It's a belief that on Shabbat we get an extra soul or an extra piece to our soul. And then some say there's Neshama Kadosha or Kedusha, which is the soul we get when we become an adult. The transition, like almost like we have training wheels on our soul, and then we become adult 12 or 13, we get the full soul. But in order to get it, you also have to study Torah and be a good person and do all these things. So there's three. And then some say we get an extra one for Shabbat. There's some say that we get our training wheels off when we get adult. And then there's some who say, well, there's a higher level of soul we can attain. Chaya, which is understanding the life force. And then there's Yechidah, which is communing with God, which is a soul that is theoretically possible. But except for Ron and Moses, nobody really gets that one. And so you can see that these are all very complicated ways. I hope I didn't complicate it too much and make it impossible to understand.
Today was very good.
It's very hard. I mean, Kabbalah is the kind of thing where you talk about it and then you leave the session and say, wow, that was powerful. And then somebody says, what did you just talk about? And you're like, can't really explain it, but it was awesome. So that's why you have to continually studying it. It's like, it's like for those people who don't have difficulty with mathematics, you have to continually remind yourself of the geometric formulas or the mathematical formulas. Some people, though, can memorize the formulas very easily. But for most of us, we've got to keep learning. And Michael, did you have something you want to say? Put your hand up. So that's a little bit about Kabbalah, or a lot. So it's really a wonderful discipline for those people who have studied and gotten to be a little older and have had their kids and have lived their lives and are a little bit ready, more stable and connected. Again, which is the opposite of what mystics are in other cultures. And it's all about, again, balance between information and our ability to control the information and to disseminate and to use the information. It's about looking beyond the spectrum of what is obvious, even beyond the discussed meaning. We're not going to really go into numerology, but we know that that's part of it as well. It's about, some people say connecting the numbers because each Hebrew letter represents a number. So it's about understanding that as well. It's really a profound way of living your life, but it's also, takes you into the clouds. And again, not everybody likes it. Not everybody wants it. A lot of people are interested in it, but you have to be able to control. So any questions about any of this?
Yeah.
Ron.
Yeah. Let me tell you how I feel about this, which I don't discuss with other people, but the way I feel that God is always at my side. I truly feel that way. So I believe in God, and but that's the way I feel. I feel that He's there. But I got a very interesting thing. Remember when you and Rabbi Cohn and us, we went to the Army Air Base in Savannah?
Oh, yeah.
And the topic was that you should always let something out. Don't hold anything in. And I told the story about the 9 guys that went to
Right.
the Pacific. When
That's such a harrowing story.
when I told that, and I said I never spoke about the 7 guys that never came back. Why was I so fortunate? And Marcia Behrens said to me, "You're here because God has other plans for you." That hit me like a good ton of bricks. And I always feel that God is truly at my side.
And it's also looking at the world from that perspective and saying, I have a purpose on this earth, take advantage of the gift. But it's about looking and saying, I have a relationship with God, but also that I want to seek what out that relationship is, even go further and try and find out what that relationship is. And that's what we're doing now. So belief in God is the most important part, but then you, of course, try and take it to the next level. And I think it's a beautiful way to end this. So we'll end a little early. Just a reminder that this Saturday, we have a special luncheon. Tammy Tischberg celebrating her 62nd anniversary to Lenny, and we're going to have a performance afterwards. Musician's going to perform, Saturday night. We have Slichot, which will be the dinner. I think it's 7:30. And then we'll have the performance. Our cantor Rachel is going to perform various songs from Broadway. Then we'll have, of course, dessert. And then I think at 9:30, we'll do our Slichot service, which is a beautiful service. Slichot, of course, is basically the preparation for the high holidays. And then the high holidays will start next Friday. So we're sending out passes. It's for security reasons and also the numbers. Everybody's welcome, even if you're not a member. We do, for just a couple of the services, members will be able to be seated first. So bring your passes. If you want more passes for people, just call up. If you're not a member and you want passes, just call up. You can either come and pick them up or they'll be at will call when you come. We usually didn't do passes, but again, we're just doing it more we want to make sure our synagogue has grown quite a bit. So we're trying to get numbers. We're doing a compromise series of services, whereas last year we had 2 of every service. This year we're just doing 2 of Yom Kippur evening, which of course is Kol Nidre, and Rosh Hashanah morning. And then will be 1 Rosh Hashanah evening and 1 Yom Kippur morning to see if we are filling the sanctuary or not because of COVID and our big YouTube presence. So passes don't cost any money for anybody. but they will be required for security's sake as well, obviously. So look at the schedule. It's going to begin next Friday night, a week from Friday. And if you want dinner, there's dinner for Rosh Hashanah, but again, all the dinner for Rosh Hashanah and the dinner for Slichot RSVP, excuse me, and that's paid RSVP.
Yeah. Exactly.
We'll also have like a break the fast, lunch after Rosh Hashanah second day, and that's all free. All right, so we look forward to seeing you guys.
We'll be there unless Hurricane Lee picks up speed. If it
Well,
doesn't
if it
pick
picks up speed, you mean this Saturday?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully we will not have a hurricane. We have had 2 high holiday hurricanes, and so hopefully we won't have one. But if we do have one, we'll do whatever's best for the congregation to make sure everybody's safe. So again, the most important thing is to laugh at my jokes. That's it. So, sorry. Be safe, everybody, and we'll see you next week on our study class that shall not be named. So, guys, have a good one, and we'll see you
Bye-bye.
later.
Michael, take care,
Take
Michael.
care.
Have a good week. Be
You guys
safe.
too.